So now what we're going to look at for our last example in this section is actually how to take an equation and write the equation of an ellipse, and then we can actually use that information to find our center, our major and minor axis, our foci, and then we can graph it, right? Ultimately, that's what we want to be able to do, is to graph our equation. So let's look at this one right here. We have this equation to start out with, right? Right here, okay? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start combining my x's and y's together. I'm going to start clumping them together, grouping them. So I see that I have 25x squared plus 250x, okay? Then I have y's. So then I have plus 9y squared minus 36y. And then finally I have this 436 number. And I need to move that to the other side because I don't want it equal to, or it's a number. It doesn't have any x's and y's. So I'm going to subtract 436. And so since it's 0 minus 436, I just get negative 436, right? I get that number right there. If it was equal to like 100, you would do 100 minus 436. You get something different. But that's essentially what we would do right there. Okay, and we're lucky that it starts with 0. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to say, okay, so I have this part right here. Now how we get that x minus something squared or x plus something squared is we have to do completing the square. But what I notice about this is that I have 25 in front of x squared. So I'm going to factor that out. And so I get left with x squared plus 250 divided by 25 is 10x plus some number, right? And that's how we're going to complete the square. We're going to figure out that blank. We're going to figure out that number. In my y's, I can factor a 9 out. And I'm left with y squared minus 4y plus blank is equal to, and then it's going to be negative 436. But notice, since I added something in purple for the x's and I added something in green for the y's, I have to add it to the other side to keep my equation balanced, right? So I'm going to add that. So plus blank and plus blank. And we have to figure out what those values are, okay? So to do that, we're going to fill in the blanks, right? So we take 10 right there, and we say, well, what's half of 10? That's 5, and 5 times 5 is 25, right? And so I added 25 to the left hand, but really I added 25 times 25. And so that's 625. That's what's going over here in this blank, okay? Now let's do the same in green, okay? So I have negative 4. Half of negative 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4, right? And not only did I add a 4 to the left, but I actually added a 4 times 9 to the left. And so that's going to be 36, okay? So I really have 36 on that side. And so now I've completed my square. And so now I've made it so to a point where these are perfect square trinomials, and so they actually form into something nice. That's a square. So let's look at that, okay? So right now I have 25. This perfect square trinomial was x plus, and then whatever that half of 10 was, which was 5 squared, plus 9 times, well, that half of negative 4 was negative 2, so it'd be y minus 2 squared is equal to, and now I got to add up all those numbers. So I go to my calculator and I do that. I say negative 436 plus 625 plus 36 is going to be 225. Okay? So now I have a number that it's equal to. But we know the equation for an ellipse has to be equal to 1. So how do I change 225 to get it to 1? So what I'm going to do to stay consistent is I'm going to divide everything by 225. Okay? So that's going to change some things. Now I have a 25 over 225. And you can probably guess that that's going to come out of, it's going to simplify as a fraction. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that on our calculator. We do 25 divided by 225, and I get some decimal. So I go to math and then to fraction, and I find it to be 1/9. So this really means that I have x plus 5 squared over 9. okay? So there's the first portion of my ellipse. Plus 9 divided by 225 is going to be 0.04, which as a fraction is actually 1 over 25. So I can write this as y minus 2 squared over 25 is equal to 1, because 225 divided by 225 is 1. That's an easy one we can figure out. Now, what do we notice about this equation? Well, the thing that I noticed is that I actually have the 9 first and the 25 second. But it was always the case when we wrote equations for ellipses, was that 25, or the bigger number, is a. That's the length of our major axis, right? So we have to flip our equation around. So let's do that. Okay, so we're actually going to write it as y minus 2 squared over 25 plus x plus 5 squared over 9 is equal to 1. So I finally have the equation of my ellipse written. And so now what I can do is I can figure out important information from this. First of which I can figure out my center, and I can figure out A and B. And if I know A and B, then I know I can figure out C. All right, so let's look at that. So what's the center of this circle? Okay, well, remember y was always with k, and x was always with h. So our equation was x minus h. So x plus 5 would be minus a negative 5, so it would be negative 5. And then k was y minus k, so in our case, y minus 2, so k is 2. So now we have our center. Awesome, we have our center. We can figure out what a is. Okay, a is going to be the square root of 25, which is 5. We know b, the square root of 9, which is 3. And so we need to figure out c, right? And so the way we figure out c, remember, is we use this equation down here. We say c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared, right? So c squared is going to be equal to 25 minus 9. So c squared is going to equal, well, 25 minus 9 is 16. And so c is the square root of that is going to be 4. So it actually turned into real nice numbers. That's kind of cool. So the last thing they asked us to do is actually to graph this. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to graph it. Okay? So, right, so let's okay? So, reminding ourselves of the important information. The center was at negative 5, 2. All right, so let's do that. So negative 5, 2 is right here. Then we knew that A was going to be 5. And since y came first, it's a horizontal graph, right? Horizontal. So what we're going to do is we're going to count from the center, we're going to count up 5, and we're going to count down 5. Okay, so it was 5. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 5, and down 1, 5. Okay. Then our minor axis B, that was 3, right? And so from this center point, we're going to count over 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2, 3. And then the foci, purple there, was 4. So from the ellipse, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. Okay, and so now we just connect our ellipse just like that. Now, mine's not perfect. Yours probably won't be perfect either, but that's the idea, right? We know that we have the length of all of these things. We have it graphed correctly. It's vertical because we know y came first, all that good stuff, okay? So good luck graphing your next one, and hopefully this was helpful.